The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
this is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
It might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report. A sunny day here in Southern California, although we are in a tsunami warning, which is a new thing for me. 8.5 years in Southern California, not had a tsunami warning. The good news, this has probably been the best week of BS Reports, I think, ever, and we're capping it off with a Hall of Famer. She's on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline right now. Jackie Macmullan, what's happening?
Hey, Bill, we do not have a tsunami here, but boy, is it raining like crazy.
Oof.
Scary stuff.
It's they've cleared the beaches, and obviously pales in comparison to all the terrible things that happened in Japan. But just never know with this stuff. It's like
come back to Boston where you belong, Bill. Come back to Boston. We don't have anything. We have no problems like that. You know that.
That is true. That is one of the benefits.
Come back where you belong, hon.
But you shoveled like 100 inches of snow this year.
Come on, I'm 50 years old. I have a snowblower now.
Oh, you have a snowblower?
Yeah, I have a snowblower and a son who's 14, so I have 2 snowblowers.
So, I wasn't sure how to start this, but let's start here.
Okay.
You were doing about as well as anybody can do, covering the NBA and writing columns and stuff like that. But you're also trying to balance raising a family, and you kind of chose the family for a while, right?
Yeah, for quite a while, and no regrets there. I'll tell you. And you have kids, young kids, I know. And
yeah.
once you realize, what happened. Actually, what happened to me, it was the finals, the Bulls and the Suns. Okay, Jordan and Barkley. And as you remember, the Bulls should have closed it out in Chicago Stadium. I had my bag packed. I was ready to go home. I had a little daughter waiting for me at home. They didn't close it out. We got on the bus. I remember I was on the bus with some other writers. They're all looking at me. And it's the only time I actually rooted openly for a team. I got to the airport the next day. I checked in. I checked my bag to Phoenix, and I got on the plane and came home to Boston. And I called my boss and said, I'm done. And I came back in on Monday. He said, you don't have to be done. You don't have to be doing this 24/7. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me, truly.
How much time did you take off? I mean, you're writing for ESPN.com now,
right.
And you've been doing more stuff than you have in the past.
Yes, I've quit twice. I guess it was, I'm trying to remember now. I went from the Globe to Sports Illustrated, and I worked there for a few years, and my son was little, and my daughter was always pretty cool with me going off and doing my thing, but my son didn't like it. So one day I just said, well, why am I doing this? So I quit Sports Illustrated. I took about 2 years off and did all sorts of fun things like be a room mother and helped paint a mural at the school and did some really cool stuff until Doug was ready to go to school and be on his own. And then when the buyouts came in 2008 at the Globe, I wanted to do the book that I did with Magic and Larry, and I just didn't think I could do both. And I thought, this would be another good time to kind of step back. My daughter was a sophomore in high school, playing 3 sports, hated to miss any of it, so I didn't. It's a great life we live if you do it the right way,
Yeah, I would agree. When you started at the Globe, you missed the first wave when
I did.
I would say it's like 76 to 79 when women were starting to go in the locker rooms.
Right.
And it did not go over that well.
No, and it didn't go over that well for me either in the beginning. One of my first assignments ever was a UMass UNH football game at UMass. And, I got there 6 hours early, too early for the stadium to even be open because I just wanted to do everything right. Yeah. I got down there at the end of the game. I went to go into the locker room, showed him my pass, and this big burly security guard said, well, you're not going in there. And I said, but I have to. And, everybody else is already in there. So I waited till he's turned his back, and I tried to go in again. And this time he actually physically had me up against the wall, prevented me from going in there. And, I was really lucky, Bill, because there were a bunch of veteran college writers around that saw it happen. They went in, they got the coach, who will always be one of my favorites, and let's give a shout-out to Bob Pickett from UMass. He found out what happened. He took that security guard's name down, took his badge number down, and then he put his arm around me. And I was doing fine until he put his arm around me, and then, of course, what did I do? I cried.
Oh, no.
I was 21, I cried.
And when did you feel like things really started to turn, that you were just going into locker rooms and that it just wasn't going to be an issue?
You know what? Once I got to the pros and covered the NBA in particular, it all went away. The colleges were hard. I can remember one time the Big East tournament, both Leslie Visser and I, a little priest up to my waist wouldn't let me in that locker room. Terrible problems with Major League Baseball. Bruce Hurst, who ended up being someone that I got to know very well and liked very much, had a fit every time I walked in there. He was a devout Mormon and had real problems with me being in there. But once I started covering the NBA, everybody kind of got it, except for Red, of course, who didn't want me in there either. And one day he was sitting with me. He said, "Why the hell you want to go in there?" I said, "Red, if you had a chance to interview a prospect, a draft prospect, okay, and he comes to town and everybody gets to go in and talk to him except for you, how can you do your job? It's the same damn thing." So the next day, Red went out and bought all his guys' bathrobes, and that was the end of it. And I will always be thankful to the NBA because they really didn't care. As long as you knew what you were doing, they were going to make sure you had the same rights as everybody else. And then once you established yourself going forward, then nobody gives you any trouble.
Would you say, out of the four sports, would you say basketball is the easiest one because it has the least amount of players, or
hockey was by far the easiest. Hockey players are the greatest. Oh,
because Canadians.
They're Canadians, and they're awesome. I will tell you one funny locker room hockey story. Everybody in there is buck naked. Now, you've been in locker rooms. You know that that's not really true in most of the other locker rooms.
Right.
But hockey guys just don't care. So I went to UNH, played basketball there, and there was a guy named Jay Miller who was a hockey player there, and kind of a thuggy kind of hockey player, later played for the Bruins. You know him, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Great guy, though. So one day I'm in the locker room and I'm interviewing Ray Bork, and they're all running around buck naked. And someone taps me on the shoulder. There it is. It's Jay Miller. He turns around and he goes, "Hey, you look familiar." Now I'm thinking, I'm not saying that to him.
Right.
He said, "You look familiar." I said, "Well, Jay, I'm Jackie Macmullan from the Boston Globe, and we went to college together." And he said, "Oh yeah? Where'd you go?" This is no lie. That's a true story.
No.
Yeah. So then, of course, all the guys in the locker room hear this. This is the year they went to the Stanley Cup and got murdered by Edmonton.
Yeah.
They all hear this and they're howling. So they said, "Well, you know what I don't know if we can say this because it's a swear, but follow me on this." Okay. They said, "You know what we call him, don't you?" And I said, "No, CH." I said, "What does that stand for?" Cement head. Okay. So not only they say you can't tell him, I said, "Okay." Then they say to Jay Miller, "Yeah, we told Jackie your nickname." So he's hounding me. We're out in Edmonton. They lose 4 straight in the Stanley Cup, and he's hounding me. Come on, tell me what CH stands for." I said, "Jay, I can't. I promised him I wouldn't tell him." We take a red eye home. You remember, right? They got swept, crucified. It's 2 a.m. Because that's when they all fly commercial back then, right? So we're all in the same flight. We're asleep. All of a sudden you hear him, "I got it. True story.
That's classic. Joe Mead, we'll just bleep the first part of that. It'll be fine.
Okay.
That's a good story. Yeah, it's a good one. A lot of people nationally probably don't remember this, but I think it was 1989. That's when the Lisa Olson thing happened in the Boston Herald. And at that point, were you covering the Celtics?
I was covering a little bit of everything,
yeah.
But I was covering mostly the NBA. But what I did was, out of solidarity to Lisa, that very next week I went down to Foxborough for a whole week.
Wow.
And it was just terrible what they did to Lisa Olson. And, she's a very, very good journalist.
Yeah, and she's had the last laugh, so to speak.
Well, but she's
had a really good career.
She has, but she hasn't, Bill, because something like that destroys you. And it destroyed her. It did in many ways. She had to leave the country. Do you understand? She had to go to Australia to work. She had people threatening her lives, slashing her tires. People don't know the backstory of Lisa Olson. It's an ugly, ugly, ugly story, and she didn't deserve it. And for my money, the Herald didn't back her the way that she should have, and the rest of the journalists in the market really didn't back her the way I feel they should have. I was sick to my stomach over that, and when I think about it, I'm still sick to my stomach over it because it put a stain on her resume that didn't belong there. She was the victim.
And for people listening who don't know the whole story, she was harassed in the Patriots locker room.
She was.
And it was something that I think, if it happened in 2011 in the Internet 24/7 sports coverage era, would have been the biggest story of this year, I think.
It probably would have been. And you know what else? Roger Goodell would have never stood for it.
No.
And that's the thing the most disappointing thing of all, of that whole scenario. Well, first of all, was the boohead owner of the Patriots who called it a fly speck in the ocean. Well, that's easy to say when you're not getting death threats and people aren't slashing your tires and questioning your credibility. Victor Kiam, I was having trouble remembering who it was. Victor Kiam. So, but the biggest disappointment of the whole Lisa Olson thing for me, and I'm sure for Lisa, was, do you know that they did not collect the fines from those NFL, from those Patriots players. They
What?
did not they did not pay their fines. And to me, that's just a disgrace. And Roger Goodell, I would like to think that would never happen. I kind of like Roger Goodell, don't you?
Well, I do like him. I do wonder if he's a little bit of an owner's puppet, and I guess we're going to find out.
Well, we'll
with
find
this
out,
lockout
right?
thing.
We'll find out.
I think the thing that's crazy, looking back at the Lisa Olson thing, and we saw it again 4 years later with Reggie Lewis in Boston after he died, when everybody was wondering if he was a coke addict or what was going on. Yeah, the Lisa Olson thing was polarizing. And you look back and you think, like, how could that story be polarizing? Everybody should have been on her side. And instead it was like people were taking sides, and it's just... It
was crazy. And, you know, I love Will McDonough, the late, great Will McDonough. He was one of my favorite people. He was a benefactor of mine. I was a pallbearer at his funeral. I miss him every day. But Will was dead wrong on Lisa Olson. And part of that was because his agent, Robert Fraley, also represented Zeke Mowatt, who was mixed up in that. And Will and I, it almost ruined Will and my friendship, to be honest with you, because we were both on opposite ends of that, and I felt the way you did. How could there be two sides to this? It's pretty clear. There's only one bad side to this, and one person just trying to do her job.
Well, it was a generational thing, too, because it was still on the heels of, well, why are they in the locker room anyway?
Well,
you play with fire, you're going to get burned.
Right. It rejuvenated that whole topic. And I can actually remember the lowest and the least proud moment of my professional career. After that happened that summer, I was covering the Red Sox, and as you know, the visitors' clubhouse, when you're waiting to go into the visitors' clubhouse, you're in essence out in the hallway where all the fans are spilling out of the stadium.
Yeah.
And I was waiting to get into the Yankees clubhouse, and the tensions were really high at that point with this whole Lisa Olson thing. And some punk kid walking out with his parents saw me waiting in line to get into the clubhouse and started saying, "Oh yeah, are you Lisa Olson? You're going in there to look at their peckers and all that other stuff." Geez. And I lost it, and I went for this kid, and I actually was about to put my hands on him. I was so frustrated and unhappy, and luckily for me, again, my own colleagues said, "Come on over here." You know, it wouldn't have. I would have been on the 24-hour news circle if that had happened.
When just because we're on this polarizing subject, when the Reggie Lewis thing went down 5 years later, that also became polarizing. You covered Reggie. You spent time with him.
I covered almost every college game of Reggie, and we both graduated to the NBA at the same time as well. So
did you ever? I mean, he was dead.
He was.
So I'm not even sure why it mattered. But it turned when they retired his number a year later. It turned into a referendum on his character, and
right.
I was working at the Boston Herald at the time, and I think I wrote an op-ed column about it. I was so mad about that whole thing. I thought it was so unfair. It's like, the dude's dead.
Yeah, it was very unseemly. But you know what? The reason it mattered, Bill, was because Donna Lewis was suing Gilbert Mudge.
True.
And that's why it mattered, because Gilbert Mudge's reputation was on. Listen, I was not a fan of Gilbert Mudge. Don't misunderstand me. But if in fact the information that Gilbert Mudge ended up testifying in court, but first off the record to the Globe, we did a months and months long investigation on it, was true, and that was that Reggie Lewis admitted to him that he was a cocaine user, then in fact that could explain why he died and what the damage done to his heart. So that's why it was relevant. That's the only reason it was relevant. I got to tell you, of all the athletes I've covered, the worst story I ever had to be involved in was that story. I loved Reggie Lewis. I loved everything about him. He was a magnificent kid with a big heart, and I think he would have been a Hall of Famer had he lived, and I loved him dearly. And as much as I disliked Gilbert Mudge and his smugness during the time that Reggie was alive, and I actually called Reggie and Donna and said, "Guys, get another opinion. You can't embrace this diagnosis just because it makes you feel good." And of course they had done that. We find that out later too. But I think that's why that story is relevant. And, you know, we run across this all the time as journalists. Whether you like someone or dislike them, at the end of the day, the truth has to matter. It really does.
The only thing is, I agree the news mattered.
It did.
But the people there were some people back in Boston who were writing some kind of character assassination.
I understand what you're saying. I do.
That was the part when I thought it went over the line. It became a sports radio running topic, and it just seemed... Something seemed wrong better. About it. He had a kid, and you know. And
you know what? By the way, Bill, his son has undergone heart surgery. So there was something to the idea that there was congenital heart problems in the Lewis family.
Didn't know that. Yeah, I mean, that was probably the darkest. Len Bias was obviously tough, but he never actually played for the team. Reggie was the hometown kid who...
Yeah, and a wonderful young man, and I just was so happy for him. We literally grew up in the business together. We both kind of hit our stride at the same time on the pro level, really, literally. We literally grew up together in the business, and it was, I was at a Kinks concert the night he died. I'd been trying to see the Kinks for years. I walked into the show. They were well past their prime at this point, but they were playing down at the old Great Woods. I was in there, not a lot of people with me because they were passé, and this usher came up to me and he said, "Hey, are you Jackie Macmullan?" I said, "Yeah," and he said, "Well, they're trying to reach at the Globe." I said, "You know what? You look like a nice guy. Can you just pretend you didn't see me? I'm on vacation." He said, "You don't understand." I said, "No, you don't understand. This is the third time I've tried to see the Kinks, and every time I do, something happens." And he said, "Reggie Lewis is dead." And I said, "Okay, I'm not seeing the Kinks this time either." And my friend, who was at the concert with me, who didn't know anything about sports, spent the night at Waltham Weston Hospital with me, waiting to get the official word on Reggie Lewis dying.
Was not a good week. It was
the worst ever.
And also it was it was really like the final nail in the coffin for the Celtics.
It was. Because, Len Bias was the bridge, and he was supposed to be the bridge from the big three to Reggie. So the bridge was gone, and then the next great one was gone. And it's why they were mired in the muck for so long after that. Not to mention that the league gave them no relief to either death, which I never understood. Yeah,
but somehow magic, they got to use half of his contract.
I know, it didn't make sense. That one was, that was really bad. I mentioned that to Stern on occasion. I hope you do next time you see him.
Oh, you kidding? I've mentioned it to him probably 4 different times.
Good, I like that.
I think it was some sort of Red Auerbach Stern thing.
Oh, yeah.
That I don't know what the history of it was, but there was something there.
Power struggle, I think, more than anything.
A little bit of a power struggle, old school, new school.
Yep.
How did you... When you started covering that team, first of all, you took over for Bob Ryan.
Oh, impossible. I know. Can you imagine?
Greatest basketball writer
ever
of all time.
Yep.
Basically created how to do that beat in a different way.
You bet.
I feel like.
Oh, the best
I know
ever.
there was some guy named George Casita who I never read, but everybody from the previous generation, who everybody said pushed the envelope. But Bob was like, it was basically columns disguised as beat stories.
It was, and his Sunday notes. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Just amazing. And when I took over the beat, it was only supposed to be for a year because he was writing the book with Larry, the first book, Drive, the book he did with Larry.
I call it the Bible.
Yeah, wonderful book. And he came and he handed me these spiral notebooks, and I said, "What are these?" He said, "These are all the stuff for the last 12 years. He said, "Here's what you got to do." And I opened it up. Every page. Now remember, we're not really using laptops yet. I mean, we're still using the big old computers. And he said, "You have to fill this out every night after every game." And it was, your basic scoreboard, really, box score, but with each player, opponents with 10 or more assists, opponents with 15 or more rebounds, opponents triple doubles, all these categories. And he said, "It's really important that you keep this going." And I mean, who was I to say no? So I did, and it took me forever. But you know what? I understood later how come Bob knew everything, because it was right there at his fingertips. He had written it down himself after every game. It made you stay very disciplined in terms of keeping up with the beat.
Did the players, because you had played in college, did the players kind of sense that, from the get-go you knew what you were talking about?
I don't know. I was never really sure, to be honest with you, because I was so frightened, that to follow the Bob. So what I was around all the time. In preseason they did 2-a-days, and most of the journalists went to the first session, and then they would call Jeff Twist to make sure no one was hurt in the second session. Well, I was scared to death that something was going to happen in that second session. I wasn't going to know it, so I went to both of them. And it wasn't until years later when I got to know Larry very well, I said to him, "So why did you let me, how did I get in, because it's hard to get in Larry's club,
Yeah.
And he said, "Because you showed up at those 2-a-days." Isn't that funny?
Interesting. Well, he always respected Ryan because Ryan actually knew their plays. I remember him saying that.
Yep.
Like if he criticizes us, well, then he knows something went wrong because he knew what guy was supposed to be where.
Right.
So I always found it interesting that he paid attention to that stuff. So you started spending time with him, and eventually it led to 2 books. Right,
it did. Yeah, the first one was actually, the thing you have to understand about Larry, and I'm sure you do because you know him, is that he's written 3 books. And or been part of 3 books, sanctioned books, and in all 3 occasions, it was in response to a book that someone else was doing that was unauthorized.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's like a competitive thing?
Yeah, absolutely. He said, if this guy's going to write an unauthorized book about me and try to make money off me, I'm going to bury the son of a gun. So I believe the first one was Daniel Levine, right, with Birds against Ryan's book.
Yeah,
and then
nothing.
there was a guy named, I'm not going to remember his first name, something Shaw. Mark Shaw, does that sound right? Was going to write a book about Bird in his second life, as a coach of the Pacers and everything else. And the minute Bird got wind of that, he's like, okay, let's go. And so that's how bird watching came about. And then the third book was a little different, I have to say, because Magic was involved in that. Right. So Larry kind of went, he'll do anything for Magic. But then as it turned out, Seth Davis wrote a book about the 25th anniversary of that great game. Now, obviously, the book that we did encompassed more than that. But again, kind of counteracted that. So that's what Larry's all about.
And as a combo, your book and the HBO documentary, which you were a little bit involved with, right?
I wasn't really. Honestly, that was something that was cut in a back room that had nothing to do with me. And to be honest with you, I wasn't very happy about it in the beginning. As you can imagine, you wrote a terrific book yourself, and you get done with your manuscript, and then you have to hand it to somebody. And your book hasn't come out yet.
So they sold it to HBO for research for them for doing the documentary?
I can't even tell you why they were involved, but they were. And you know what? They were right, as it turned out, Bill, because by the time that documentary had come out, our book had been out since November, and you know how this goes. You have that real high period, and then it kind of goes into a low, and the HBO documentary revived interest in the book. So as usual, the business people, and I'm not a business person, I'm a journalist, they were right. They were right. But at the time, to hand them my manuscript when I didn't even have it in book form yet,
right,
that was difficult.
The one thing that I think there's been some revisionist history with the Bird Magic thing like that. The one thing that Bird says that drives me crazy, and I just don't believe him, and I think he believes it's true, but I don't think it was true, is that, from the get-go, he was checking the papers every morning to see how Magic was doing, all that stuff. Their rivalry didn't really get going until the '84 finals. For the first 5 years, Bird measured himself against Doc. Doc was the guy that he had to beat. Doc was the guy they played 4 preseason games with, and then 6 regular season games, and then usually a 7-game playoff series. That was the team. The Lakers, we played twice a year.
Right, but here's the thing. See, with Bird, it's this mental scoreboard. That's kind of what drives him. Yeah. And as maybe as an individual rivalry, you might be right about Irving, but think about it. How many rings had Doc won?
True. And then Final Four in 79, Magic won the title.
And then his first year in the league, he wins. And see, that drives Bird crazy.
Yeah.
It ate away on him. So you are right, but he has all sorts of mental scoreboards inside that brain, and he's keeping score all over the place. But I think one of the saddest things is the way that Julius and Larry ended up, that little skirmish. And I think it's a shame that that's the way their relationship went, because it really was a great rivalry.
I was there.
Were you?
I was.
So
what's
your take on it? I'm interested in what your take is.
I have a very vivid take because I remember everything about that game, and I've written about it a little bit. But
yes, you have.
It was basically
he embarrassed Dr. J and all that.
Yeah, he killed him. I mean,
right.
It was the game that he had been trying to beat this guy for 5 years. And then finally he had his number, and Doc was a little on the downside. Mm-hmm. And these teams had fought a few times, and I think at that point they'd been in 4 out of 6 playoff series or whatever the number was. And there was, and Bird was rubbing it in. And Doc got mad, and he fouled him hard. And then they were running back up court, and I think he kind of gave him a little pat, sorry about that. And Bird told him to F off, and things escalated.
So go back and look at the tape. Go back and look at the tape of the what you call the hard foul.
Yeah.
Where was the foul?
It was they were running up court on the Boston side.
But it was below the waist.
Right.
Bird will always deny it, but that's what set him off.
Yeah.
In his mind, it was a cheap shot.
Yeah.
And he'll never say that publicly.
No.
He barely will talk to me about it. That's why it's never in any of the books or anything. He won't talk about it because you know why? He still respects Dr. J too much.
Well, and then there was a lot of stuff that came out of that, including Malone and Barkley come from behind. They grab Bird.
Right.
And Doc hits him with 2 punches as he's being held back, which that's probably why their friendship has never come back. But also you had a couple Celtics just standing around watching it. I think Maxwell was the only guy who came in, And supposedly Bird was really mad about that nobody had his back, and meanwhile Malone and Barkley had Doc's back immediately.
Right. I think that's all true. That's all true.
You're right, because those guys did a video game together.
Yeah, and you know what they did a regional Converse commercial in New York City. Doc, Irvin, and Larry all did a regional commercial that they shot in New York City, and they went to dinner afterwards. And Bird, when they were supposed to meet at the restaurant the night before to go over what they were going to do, and you needed a jacket to get into the restaurant, and Bird was there with a buddy, and he had on a windbreaker, and all they would have had to do was give him a jacket. You know, those places have jackets. Bird's like, screw this, and he left.
So you don't think – so they run into each other, and it's just like, hey, how's it going? But it's just there's no warmth.
No warmth.
Amazing. 25 years ago, that
right.
fight.
But, Larry's kind of like that. The one thing about Larry that's interesting to me is he kind of just moves on. Like, remember he and Red kind of near the end had some things going on that didn't make sense, and that was mostly over Dave Gavitt, because Larry swears by Dave Gavitt, loves Dave Gavitt like a father, and, of course, loved Red like a father at one point, but felt that Red was a little unfair to Dave in the way that he handled that thing. And yet, so they... it wasn't awful, but it was kind of this unspoken, stubborn, two stubborn guys. It was kind of going on, and they were saying things like, I don't think Red likes me, and Red's like, well, I don't know what Larry's deal is, and it kind of was lingering on there. And then, Red started to get old, and by then Larry was retired, and I think started to get a little reflective, and he started calling Red, and by the end of his life, Larry was calling Red like every 1 to 2 weeks just to check in to make sure he was okay. So They made their peace, which is a good thing.
That's good. And what about the Bird-McHale relationship?
They're fine now. You know what?
They're good.
Yeah, they're fine now because it's past. It's over with. Bird to this day will blame Paxson for that. He really felt like Jim Paxson was a clubhouse lawyer, caused a rift between them. That was starting to happen anyway. And you go back and look at it, and Bird, remember the point forward comment after a loss in Detroit, and a direct dig at Jimmy Rogers, and I don't think McHale liked that. And the difference between McHale and Larry is that when McHale was wrong, he would always come back and say the next day, you know what, I was wrong, I made a mistake. And the one I remember the most was, again, at the end of McHale's career, when he was breaking down physically, Chris Ford was the coach, his good friend and his former teammate, and he didn't play him in one of the playoff games. I think it was in the Charlotte series. He didn't play him very much down the stretch. And McHale kind of went off. Do you remember this? Kind of went off a little bit on Ford. And then the next day came back and said, you know what, I was wrong. I was wrong to do that. I was frustrated. I was upset. I should never have done that to Chris Ford. And Bird, when he's wrong, he's just not very good at that. So I think that's part of where it started. And really, it was mostly about two guys who were aging and were breaking down physically. And so when they both retired, it wasn't that good for a while. But now it's fine. It's absolutely fine, because now they can look back at the good stuff. You don't remember 91 anymore. You remember 86.
Well, McHale always had a healthy appreciation for the fact that he got to be Larry Bird's teammate.
Right.
And it would surface sometimes after some big games. Like, he clearly understood, like, I'll never be quite as good as this guy, but I'm so blessed because this could have been a lot worse. I could have been in Sacramento the last 10 years.
And what Larry could never come to grips with was that, in his mind, Kevin McHale could have been every bit as good as him and probably better, and Larry could never come to grips with the idea that, you know what, when you, like all the time, you have a guy down, you scored 35 points, you got your foot on his throat, Larry crushes the larynx, McHale says, the guy's had enough and helps him up, and that's just the difference between the two of them.
We talked, I had Michael Smith on my podcast on Monday, your old Celtics friend.
Yes.
And we were talking about the Bird-McHale thing, and my whole weird psychological theory was always that McHale, or Bird, was always a little disappointed that McHale didn't care like 8% more because he felt like maybe that would have pushed him to even go to another place.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, not a little disappointed, a lot disappointed. And what he hated was stuff like when Fitch was the coach in his last year and those guys all laid down on him. I mean, that was just incomprehensible to Larry Bird, and I think he felt McHale was part of that, and in his mind, that's a year they should have won another championship. He really believes they were good enough that year to win a championship if they could have put all the petty stuff aside with Fitch. Now, of course, they couldn't. Max and ML and all those guys couldn't do it. And Larry, in his mind, again, that mental scoreboard, that's another year we squandered. 85 to him will always stick in his craw as a year they squandered, but that's not on McHale, that's on Max.
Yeah, that was Maxwell not coming back in time. Finally, at 25-year anniversary, I finally forgave him.
Did you?
For the title we lost. Yeah, things are better with me and him now.
Well, I'm glad.
The Bird It is funny. Like I do think he thinks about the lost titles.
Oh, he does all the time. And you know what? That's not revisionist history with him. He's thinking it at that moment. And that's the difference, I think, between him and other players. And I think, I'm actually doing a book with Shaquille O'Neal. We're writing a book. Yeah, and
I'm excited for that one.
He's doing that in retrospect instead of at the moment. That's the difference between the two of them. Shaq can look back now and said, geez, if Kobe and I could have put our petty stuff aside, we should have won 5. And he's right. He's right.
Well, and also if Shaq had really gotten into shape throughout his career, I think, it's
But Shaq's approach to that, I think you'll find it interesting when it's all laid out for you. There's a method to the reason he did things the way he did, and a lot of it has to do with his body and how broken down it got. And how I don't think people realize when you're that big, the beating that he took and everything. But that's another story for another day. But
yeah, a lot of people holding his shoulders every time he dunked, and
yeah, that's right.
I see that. I always felt, I wrote this in my book, I always felt like Shaq was the guy who he could have gotten the 3.9 in college. Mm-hmm. But he settled for like the 3.25, but he had an awesome time.
Yeah, I had more fun than you and I put together.
Yeah, he was fine with that. He's like, hey, I didn't fail out. I got 3.25. I won a couple titles, and I had an awesome time. And I made weird movies and did songs. And
I mean, wouldn't you love to have his life? Everything he's done. His problem is he's too generous. He's generous to a fault, and I hope it doesn't come back to bite him. He has trouble saying no to anybody. And we've seen many of those stories in our day. Dominique Wilkins at the top of the list, who made all that money and lost all of it, and now is trying to make it back again because he was so generous to his family.
You talk about Antoine Walker, not Dominique Wilkins.
Oh, no, Dominique Wilkins, too.
Dominique Wilkins, too? I didn't know about
Dominique Wilkins couldn't say no. Gerald Wilkins, his brother, could say no. Now, you tell me, who should have more money? It's pretty obvious, right? Neek? But Neek couldn't say no to his mother and his cousins and his distant uncles, and he gave away a lot of his money. And he, for a while, was close to being broke.
Well, what are you going to cover in the book? Shaq has a pretty bad reputation as when the going's good, he's fine, and when the going's bad, he can be pretty polarized in the locker room. Like the Miami thing ended terribly. The Lakers thing obviously ended terribly. The Phoenix thing could not have gone worse.
Right.
And now it seems like he's in a pretty good spot in Boston, and I can't tell if it was just bad situations in the other places, or maybe he wised up a little bit.
You know what happens to him, and this is what I would say. I think he's an incredibly sensitive guy, much more sensitive than I think people realize. And I think what happened in L.A. killed him. I think it crushed him. He wanted to stay there, and Kobe didn't want him there. And in the end, Jerry Buss didn't want him. And listen, did Shaq contribute to that? Of course. Shouldn't have, done the stuff in Hawaii when he was yelling, "Pay me," to Jerry Buss and all that. That's his pride talking, and sometimes his pride overtakes him. But he wanted to stay in L.A. and they wanted him to take a pay cut, and Kobe didn't want him there. Kobe didn't want Phil there. I mean, he ran them both out.
Yeah.
So to me, the way it ended in L.A., I think that at the time he was so hurt that he tried to put his own spin on it and blast his way out of town on his terms. But I don't put that one on him.
Well, here's the thing. In fairness to Kobe, which is probably a phrase nobody has ever said in the history of sports who's not from L.A., my Laker fans, like, they really felt like Shaq kind of quit on that team the last 2 years. Like, he just wasn't – he would basically play himself into shape over the course of the season. And Kobe had to carry the team for the first 4 months of those last 2 regular seasons. And I think they felt like you can't have it both ways. Like, you can't say you always want to be a Laker, but then pay me, but then I'm going to play myself into shape. I think the Laker fans were just kind of disenchanted about how he handled that.
Well, the one thing I think they have a legitimate case with was the toe surgery. And, the comment, which he never should have made, was, if I get hurt on company time, I'm going to heal on company time. That was just ill-advised.
Yeah.
But that surgery, again, I think you'll find there was a lot more to that than you think. I'll leave it at that for now.
Oh, for your book.
Yes, sir.
This book's going to be good, isn't it?
I hope so.
You know how
this
a title?
goes. You know how this goes. When you write a book with someone, if you get everything in, it's a miracle. This is my third one that I've done an as told to. The other, the Magic and Larry book was a third person narrative. But these as told tos, you get to the ninth inning and you got all this incredible stuff, and then it's never the athlete, by the way, that says, no, that can't go in there. It's an agent or a wife or a mother or someone that just rips your heart out because they veto stuff that should be in there. So
you're going into this knowing you're going to lose 7 awesome stories and 3 newsworthy items that would
possibly
really help the book.
Although I think Shaq wants this to be, I just think you're going to see a side of Shaquille O'Neal that I had no idea existed. And I should be done reporting now, but I can't help it because you know how it is when you do. Yeah. It leads from one thing to the next, and I just think there's some stuff about him that I find incredibly fascinating and explains a lot to me why he was and is the way he is. I'll tell you this, Bill. He is the single most generous athlete I have ever been around. And
the stories about him going to the Walmart in Phoenix in the middle of the night.
Well, how about this one? I'll give you one.
Stuff?
I'll give you one without blowing my whole book on this show. But there was a guy named Rudy who was one of the equipment guys that worked for the Lakers. Yeah. And Shaq's coming in one day, and Rudy, is driving up behind him, and he says to Rudy, man, what a piece of junk. He's driving a Hyundai, I think it was. Yeah. He's like, come on, man, get yourself a real car. And he said, hey, Shaq, you know what, man? I don't make $20 million like you do. And Shaq felt bad. He felt bad because, of course, that's true. He went out and bought the guy a Ford Ranger the next day.
Nice. He made it up to Rudy.
I guess.
How are you going to cover blue chips in this book?
Yeah, probably.
I demand at least 3 blue chips.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to blue chips yet, but we will, of course, because the irony of that is Penny and Shaq. That's where the love affair started.
Well, and then Shaq had the greatest quote. I hope you dive into the Corleone's quote because that was my favorite that he ever came up with about Penny was Fredo.
Right. I printed out 62 pages of Shaq quotes, and as I was doing it, my son, who the 21st century guy, said to me, "Do you know how many trees you're killing by printing out all these quotes?" I said, "Yeah, but I need them, Doug. I gotta print them out." There's pages after pages. My favorite one is, why does everybody keep talking about money, money, money? All I want to do is wear my Reeboks and drink my Pepsi. Right. Yeah, that was a great one, too.
And he's got an awesome sense of humor by all accounts. Kimmel knew him a little bit from when, when Shaq was in L.A., obviously.
Right.
They did Jimmy did one of the roasts. I think he did the Shaq roast. Mm-hmm. But then you can find this on YouTube, the Emmitt Smith roast, too.
Oh, beautiful.
And Shaq's personality comes out in those roasts because he's just classic ball busting.
Very quick.
Loves.
You should hear him rap on cue.
Yeah.
He got on here with you now. I don't know what kind of relationship you have with him, but he'd do a rap on you for 5 minutes that would embarrass you, humiliate you, make you laugh out loud, and make you cry. He can do it on cue. And that's why that whole thing remember the whole Kobe rap? Yeah. Everybody was all up in arms about that. They did that every day on the bus. Every day.
Why do you think that the Phil Jackson thing, why did they lose their tightness?
Wait, who?
Shaq and Phil Jackson.
Oh, no, they're fine. They're fine. They're good.
I thought they weren't fine for a while.
No, they're fine. I had lunch with Phil at the Ritz when they were in town here in Boston. We had lunch for 2 hours. And of all the people I've interviewed, he was by far the most positive and emphatic about how much he loves that guy.
Oh, I brain farted. And by the way, my son woke up at 5:30 today. That's why. I didn't mean Phil. I meant Pat Riley.
Oh, yeah, that's bad. Yeah, that's just 2 different personalities. You're coming off Phil, who kind of let Shaq be Shaq. And then you come to Pat, who's doesn't let anybody be anybody. You got to do it my way. And I have a lot of respect for Pat Riley and what he's accomplished. But he and Shaq were just a bad match.
They got a title out of each other, though.
They did. And you know what? That's how Shaq can rationalize it. And he's like, man, what happened was supposed to happen. Should we have won 2? Maybe, but not really, because if you remember, both he and Wade started having injuries right after they won that championship. Both of them had fairly significant injuries over the next couple of years.
Well, they should have won in 05. Wade hurt his shoulder in the Eastern
Yeah.
Finals, and I think they would have won that series.
Right, but they had injuries, and that whole 3-year period, Shaq had a lot of injuries in Miami. A lot of things went bad with his body, and so.
Did you even know that him and Kevin Garnett were legitimately friends?
I did, and the reason I knew that was I did a piece on KG last year, and when Shaq was in town with Cleveland, I was asking him about him. I'm like, help me understand this guy, because I just couldn't get through to KG. I kind of pride myself on getting athletes to open up. That's kind of my calling card. And I was having trouble. So I said to Shaq, tell me about him. He goes, oh my God, he's the funniest guy, and we're great friends. And I said, you're kidding me. And when I finally got my interview with Garnett in Chicago last year, we sat down in Chicago, and he gave me about as close to an opening up interview as he gives. He couldn't stop talking about Shaq. So I kind of knew that coming in.
That's funny. We've been doing the association, which I've been involved with, the show about the Celtics.
Right.
KG, as always, didn't want to be involved and say, I don't want to be in that. And so we ran 2 episodes, and his wife really liked it. And his wife was like, "Why aren't you in this?" He's like, "I didn't want to be in it." "You're crazy. You should be in this. This is a great show." So then all of a sudden he goes up to the guys, "Hey guys, I think I'm ready to do an interview." But it's just funny. And then all of a sudden, obviously he does, once he gets going, he gets going.
Oh, no, he's very good. Very, very, very good. But it's all about trust with him. It's all about trust with him. Most guys, like Shaq, trusts you first unless you give him a reason not to. KG's the opposite. He's not going to trust you for anything unless you give him a reason or he sees something that makes him want to trust you.
Yeah, and something must have...
He's been the biggest challenge of all for me. Of all the athletes I've ever covered and been around, he's still the biggest challenge.
Something must have happened to him in high school.
It did. You know that whole story about him in high school.
I don't, actually. What is it?
Oh, yeah, no. He was in high school. He was at a party. They had won the championship, I think it was. They were a big outdoor party, like at a park or whatever. And there was a fight. There was some stuff going on. There was some drinking. There was some problems. And the cops came, and they arrested him. The big 7-footer guy, right? The big 7-foot black dude. And they arrested him and took him down to station and booked him and everything. And he kept waiting for his guys, his boys, to come back him up and say, hey, it wasn't him. He wasn't involved. And that didn't happen. And he was he couldn't believe it. This community that had loved, it happens all the time, right?
Yeah.
We love we put them up on the pedestal, and then we can't wait to whack them down when something goes wrong. And he was just so devastated by the lack of support in that community in South Carolina, and that's why they moved. They moved to Chicago. They went to Farragut. That's one of the reasons why. And I asked him when I did this piece on him last year. I said, how did that affect you? He said, profoundly. I compared him and LeBron, whose high school experience was perfect, right? It was dream world. All these kids, the guys you grew up with, the coaches, everything was great, and I think it framed who he became. And for KG, it was the exact opposite, and he told me, yep, from that point on, I don't trust anybody.
It's interesting that he's become the most despised player in the league from a national fan standpoint.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised it didn't happen before now. I think it is just he's in Boston, which is such a high-profile city and obviously a high-profile team. Yeah. I mean, a lot of this talking to himself and all the expletives and the pounding, he's been doing that all along, but it's just a little more relevant now. And guys, I think, feel a little more empowered to challenge him publicly now because he's not the same guy.
I wrote last summer that I thought Shaq signed with the Celtics for very little money. He obviously could have made more because of the Kobe thing and because of what Kobe said after he won the title in the press conference. And I felt like I don't think it was 100% why he signed, but it was definitely like 83%. Do you buy that?
Well, he wasn't going to sign with, Sacramento or, it had to be a team that was going to contend because really, and when you think about it, why else would you go there? I think he was close to going to Atlanta.
Well, I think it was for a lot more money.
Yeah, but I don't think in the end the money came through. I might be wrong about that, but we haven't gotten that far either yet. But yeah, he's keeping score with Kobe. Of course he is. And yet, what's funny? I think he's at a point now, just again, the two personalities, think about them. I think Shaq's like, if he saw Kobe, yeah, all right, big deal, dog. We've been through a lot. Yep, you got me, I got you. Let's move on. But Kobe's the one that can't do that now.
It's interesting because Shaq should hold the bigger grudge because when
absolutely, but I don't think he does.
That's not his
personality. It's not his personality to do that. Where it is, Kobe's a shark in bloody waters, man. And that's why he's the best. I would want him on my team every single time.
I was thinking about how there's certain guys wired. Bird and Magic were wired like this, and Kobe and I think Jordan, where these guys at basketball was everything to them.
Everything. Yep.
And both Bird and Magic, strangely, had to quit for reasons that had to do with it was time for them to quit.
Right. It's the tragedy of both of their careers, in my opinion.
And it happens like basically right next to each other. If Bird's back doesn't go, do you think he plays till he's 40?
No, because it was very hard for him to play those final years at a subpar level. In fact, he wanted to leave. He didn't want to play that last year. Gavitt just begged him to. And he really did want to retire a year earlier.
And how about Magic?
Magic would have played till he was 50. Bird knows. I think Bird's good at, I think Bird's afterlife has been much more calm than Irvin. I think Bird knew he's more pragmatic than Magic. He knew his time was going to be up, and when it was up, then it was time to move on. He's very good at. Bird doesn't look back. He's not reflective the way Irvin is. He's not nostalgic the way Irvin is. He just moves on to the next thing. Like people say all the time, "Now, what a shame you don't have a better relationship with the Celtics and everything." Well, he could if he wanted to, but he's on to the next thing. Irvin still watches the '87 finals on his private jet when he's going somewhere. That's just the difference between the two of them.
Well, I think Bird could see the finish line for 4 years.
Exactly.
Magic's finish line basically clotheslined him.
Right. Well, it's like
no idea it was coming.
It came up and hit him in the face, and then the time it took for the rest of the world to understand that HIV was not a death sentence, and that you can't get it from drinking out of a cup, and you can't get it from his sweat, and he's not a pariah. It took 3 years to get to that point, and those are 3 years that he lost. He could have been playing. When you look back on it, I mean, you and I both know there's probably multiple players in the NBA right now that are HIV positive. We just don't know about it.
You think so?
I do.
Yeah, I guess I never thought about it, but if you're not getting tested, how would you know?
And you know what? That was a big thing at the one of the revelations when the game was ours that it made me feel in retrospect really naive as a journalist. I was there in '92 for the great comeback in Orlando. I was actually I was 8 months pregnant with my daughter, but I really wanted to go, and I wanted to see that whole spectacle, and it was all positive, it was all feel good, it was all great, Disney and the NBA, and meanwhile, behind the scenes, you have there was a luncheon with Elizabeth Glazer, who was dying of AIDS, and brought in by Magic's people to educate the players' wives about this disease, and she got up there and said, you can't get it from this, you can't even get it really from kissing, you can't get it from this and that, and they all went up to her afterwards and said, we're so sorry for you and your family, but I don't want my husband playing against that guy. And there was so much negative undercurrent that the league did a wonderful job of keeping quiet. And one of the things that the sponsors and the owners were saying is, we don't want Magic in this league. And David Stern said, okay, well, I'll tell you what we'll do then. We'll have mandatory testing for HIV. You guys want to do that? Are you sure all your guys are fine? And that was the end of that.
Mm. Well, you mentioned the word naive. I do wonder if we're in the beginning of a similar thing with PEDs, and we had Rashard Lewis and O.J. Mayo, and that's it. It's really hard for me to believe that those are the only two.
Yep. No, I agree. It's we don't take a hard enough look at it, and it always blows me away that Barry Bonds and McGuire and A-Rod and all these guys, the condemnation that they receive because of their steroid use, and then we got guys every other week in the NFL that get suspended for 4 or 5 games, Sean Merriman and whoever else, and it's like, yeah, okay, they'll be back in 5 weeks, no big deal. I don't get it.
In baseball, it was about the records.
I know.
And they ruined the records, and that made everybody mad because baseball is a sport that really feeds off those stats.
It's all about numbers. Yep.
Basketball doesn't as much. I still you think of how much cheating goes on in every other sport. And then cycling and track and field, and you got blood doping and all these different things these guys can do. And then, I wrote about this a month ago. You have guys playing at a really high level, well beyond anything we've seen other than Karl Malone. And it does make me wonder. And, for instance, if you go case by case, it makes sense. Paul Pierce doesn't go out anymore. He's in the best shape of his life. He's dieting. This is a guy that had he approached his previous 10 seasons like he approached this one, I think, would have gone down as one of the best 30 players of all time, maybe.
Yeah, I agree. Although his mindset was always a little different. His mindset, that's the one, and he's the best reclamation project ever. And do you realize he's about to pass Larry Bird as in the all-time leading scoring Celtics?
It's incredible.
Yeah, it is.
And Tony Batiste carried him. If not for Tony Batiste, he may have died on a sidewalk.
Exactly.
But and on that heavy leather jacket he wore. I do think though, and he's somebody that I feel like I've watched, most of the games of his career, and I went to God knows how many of those first 3 seasons of his.
Yeah, the miserable ones.
Yeah, and that I don't think he ever dealt with that stabbing thing, and the whole incident, how it played out, and then whether to snitch on the guys who did it, and.
Well, we'll never know that whole story, I don't think.
No.
There's more to that story. I think we all know that.
Oh, my God. That story is so complex. But all of a sudden they were in the playoffs the next year, And I don't know if you ever dealt with it. And, it was also an era, I'm sure you had to deal with this covering these guys. Like, it was not a likable era of personalities. Mm-hmm. Very entitled, guys making a lot of money too early.
Right.
Now it seems like everybody's, you see these younger guys, it seems like their head's in the right spot for the most part.
Well, I think if they're on the Celtics, they're not given a choice. I mean, Doc is really tough on the young guys. Really, really tough on them.
But even look at Derrick Rose, Blake Griffin, these kids are coming in now and
Blake Griffin, what a joy.
They're handling themselves well.
Yeah, he's a joy. And homeschooled too. It's amazing. He gets into the big bad world and he's so ready for it.
Yeah.
He's very impressive. Very impressive.
He's already the leader of that team. So where do you see the Celtics season going?
Well, I didn't mind the Perkins trade as much as everybody else. I tell everybody, go back and look at the 2008, because everybody wants to talk about that championship. Go back and look at the 6-game series with the Lakers. He missed one game with the bad shoulder. He played 20-plus minutes in 2 of the games and played under 14 minutes in the other 3.
Yeah.
You and I both know what happened down the stretch when they had to win the game. They couldn't have him on the court with Rondo because then it was 3-on-5 on the offensive end of the floor.
So
as much as I love Perk, and I do love him because he did everything and then some that you could have ever asked out of him. Talk about a guy who changed his body. And I asked him one day, I go, man, you've lost so much weight. He said, it was Propel. I said, what? He said, I stopped drinking Gatorade. I started drinking Propel. I got 140 calories just by doing that. And I said, how many of those did you drink a day? He goes, about 10. I'm like, that's a lot of calories,
No.
But anyway, so I loved him. And I'm we're all emotionally attached to him here, I think, because of the championship and all that. But they can spread the floor. A lot depends on Shaq. I think Shaq's going to be all right. I really do. And I know everybody likes to poo-poo and laugh at Jermaine O'Neal, but honestly, even if the dude comes back and gives them 6 fouls and blocks a couple shots and gets, 2 or 4 points of garbage around the basket, that's going to help a lot if you come up against a team like the Lakers. So, they're poised to still do it. But, and here comes the but, health, injuries, they're fragile. And I don't think KG's 100% right. As great as he's playing, I think he's really feeling his age. I really do. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if he retires at the end of this year. Especially if there's a lockout. I'm not kidding you. He keeps saying little things, like at the All-Star game, well, if this was my last one, then this was a great way to go out. Why do you say that? And I said to him something about, oh, you must be dying to get back playing again, because they were playing so well going into the All-Star break. And he said, no, rest is good. I said, wow, I never thought I'd hear you say that. And he said, no. He goes, we may look healthy, but we ain't. And little things like that. I think he's looking at it and saying, if we win it this year and then there's a lockout, I don't need to come back. Now, this is all conjecture on my part.
Well, both him and Duncan, I think, just a lot of miles.
Yeah.
Duncan had those 100-game seasons, and Garnett was in the league 2 years earlier than Duncan and was playing 82 games from the get-go. And
and
at some point, it's got to add up.
And it's adding up with Kobe, too. And you know what? Yeah. I mean, I was talking to Brian Shaw the other day, and he was saying, Kobe, he used to make fun of me. I told him, don't jam in practice every day. Save some of that for the game. Save it for later. And he's laughing at me because I'm icing, my knees after every practice. And I said to him, you'll see, young fella. And guess what? Now who's icing his knees after practice every day? And, Kobe's still got the killer instinct, but his body is starting to slow down. And, he's the ice man. He's just like, remember Ewing? Ewing used to have to ice his knees before games by the end of his career.
Yeah, it's tough because Andrew Bynum, he hogs all the ice packs.
There you go, and big ones, too.
Well, you were just reminding me because we were talking about Bird and Magic, about how long would they have played, and I was setting that up for the next question, and I forgot to ask it, which is, I think Kobe's wired like magic. Like, I think they're going to have to, basically remove him with security to get him out of the locker room when he's 45.
No,
I don't see him ever retiring.
I think you're right, but I think that his body is starting to betray him a little bit. He's winning by being wily. I mean, he's still terrific. He's still the best closer in basketball, but his body is starting to betray him a little bit. And at some point, his body's just not going to let him do what he wants to do because he's not a guy that's going to want to be like Jordan was in that Wizards uniform. That's not going to play well.
Yeah, but the only thing is sometimes you don't know that you're Jordan in the Wizards uniform.
Right.
You're telling
I agree.
yourself that you're not. I think Jordan didn't know that he was Jordan in the Wizards uniform.
And you know what? I don't think he still knows. Isn't that the funny part?
No, I think he might come back. I did notice one thing with Kobe last night. We taped this on a Friday. Wade went by him a couple times.
Yep.
And I don't ever remember seeing another shooting guard, especially somebody that Kobe was hyper competitive with,
right,
just go by him.
Like,
beat him off just basically abuse him, especially on the game-winning play.
Right. But
that was the first time I've ever seen that.
But see, that's what I mean. That's where you're at with Kobe, and that's not to say he still can't be a guy that can win you a championship, because he can, because he's smarter than everybody. He's more prepared than everybody. He's still as talented as many. I won't say more talented than everybody at this point of his life, but his body has to do it. And I don't know that it always can at this age. We've seen it a million times, you know. And that's why, once again, Ray Allen never got down and dirty the way Kobe does, you know. But Ray Allen is timeless because of the preparation, a lifelong, you know, obsessiveness with preparing himself properly. That's why he can still do what he's doing. Most guys, you know, that's a lifelong thing, though. That's not like Paul Pierce deciding to do it in the last 2 years. That's Ray since the time he was a little boy doing that.
And when you watch Ray in person, this is why I think it's so important to go to NBA games if you really care about the league. You know, just try to get in the building once or twice, because like, you see somebody like Ray and how much he runs, and you just can't get that on TV. He
runs about, I think someone told me once, 5.5 miles in one game.
At the same speed.
Right.
Full speed, full tilt the whole time. And it's like, it's got to be, for him, part of the reason he succeeds is in the fourth quarter, it's got to be the same speed, because he's basically based on running the other guy into the ground.
Exactly. And he does
that's
it so
why
well.
If we play Miami, like I'm on the team, if the Celtics play Miami in round 2, or round, you know, whatever round it would be, Dwayne Wade chasing him around for 7 games, on top of the fact that he's just played 90 playoff games, because every game for this team is a playoff game. I don't think he's going to be able to chase him around.
Yeah, it's going to be hard. And you know, Ray will outlast almost everybody, but the price he paid to get to that point is incredible. I don't think people realize it controls every waking minute of his life.
What are you talking about?
Well, just the way Ray has to do everything exactly the right. It's exhausting. You know, there's a piece of paper on the floor. I remember him telling me there was a piece of paper on the floor. He saw it and he said, "I got to pick that up." And he's like, "No, I'm not going to pick it up." And he went upstairs and he sat upstairs for an hour, going, "I got to go down there and pick it up."
Right.
That's his brain.
Do people realize like the depths of his OCD?
No, I don't think they do. And you know, the only guy that's come close to it that I've ever met is Jerry West. Same way. Yeah. Jerry West is the same way.
Well, I think Ray could play. Now, that's a guy that I think could play till he's 42 and actually still be 25 minutes a game good at age 42.
And you know what? I used to laugh about the big three. You know, everybody was saying, "Oh, well, Robert, he's so much older than Kevin and Larry. You know, he'll be the one to go first." No, not really.
Yoga and pot. It's a good combo.
I know, huh?
Where do you stand on this Miami thing? Too much scoring, not enough scoring, right amount of scoring?
You know, Bosch showed me something last night that I didn't know he had. But can he do it every game? I sincerely doubt it. The fact that he can do it even for one game, though, if I'm a Miami fan, would give me a little bit of hope. I still say, at the end of the game, as great as LeBron is, Wade needs the ball. It just has to be that way. Wade's got to have the ball.
It's so weird, though. You get the most talented player in the league, and he's standing in the corner on giant possessions.
I know it. But it's why they're flawed, you know, and they don't have the interior defense that they need, and you know they still don't have the chemistry that they need. But they're so good. I think it's silly when people say they're not going to be there. I don't know how you know that, because they're a work in progress every single day. You know, I don't believe that you can say anything definitive about this team yet. I just don't believe that.
Well, then you think I'm silly, because I don't see them making it. I just think you need at least 7. You need to at least be able to go to war with 7 people. And
I don't know. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true in this league anymore. And, you know, if Mike Miller can get his act together, if he can play like he played last night, you can add him to the mix.
I don't trust him. Home game, he made a couple threes. I
guess, you know what it is? I really think LeBron's that good, and I think Wade's that determined. Now, Bosch, I don't know about. His comments just made me laugh out loud.
I know.
I want the ball in the post. Really?
You don't even go to the low post.
You've never been to the low post. Let me show you. Let me give you some directions. You know, call up MapQuest and we'll show you how to get there.
I like what Barkley always does. Chris Bosh is a nice guy. He's a nice guy. But he's a small forward in power forward's body.
That's exactly correct.
But he really is. He's a small forward in power forward's body. And it was the fundamental flaw of how they put together that team.
And let me ask you something. When you heard that Heat players were crying, who was your first guess?
Mine were Miller and Bosch.
Bosch. First,
Yeah.
right off the
I thought
top.
Macmullan first because he really looks like he's melting down mentally. Last night was a good step for him, I guess. But
I wonder what's going on with Eddie House. He's in the doghouse, huh?
yeah, but we knew from last year when he was in the Celtics that he was washed up.
Well, yeah, we knew that, but they kept playing him. They kept going to him.
You mean the Celtics did?
Yeah, and
we didn't have
the
a
Heat.
choice though.
And the Heat. No, and the Heat did too.
Yeah. Well,
So-
I think you forget like Eddie didn't play for 11 straight playoff games in 2008.
Yeah, that's
He's
correct.
never really been a sure thing. I wrote a column today about the game, and to me that the Heat, their biggest issue is I called it the irrational confidence guys.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have that Vernon Maxwell, Sam
Right.
Cassell,
Yep.
the guy who's just like, he can see the fear in LeBron's eyes and Miller's eyes, and Wade's not shooting well, and Bosh wants no part of it, and the guy is just like, just give me the ball, I'll shoot.
Right.
They don't have that guy.
You know what's funny? It's too bad Nate Robinson wasn't good enough because he could have been that guy for the Celtics too. Because he's just that, but he just doesn't have the ability or the poise or anything. But he had that, MF, give me the ball. Just give it to me. I'll do it. And you're like, no, you can't.
Well, Nate was hurt this year, I think, was the other issue.
Yeah,
I don't know
obviously.
if he was.
I mean, that's why the other reason why people want to kill this trade, but I'm telling you, they knew Perk was going to be out 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So he's got one surgically repaired knee, now another bad knee, 2 bad shoulders. Nate, they knew was hurt. Are you kidding me? And everybody's saying, well, they made this trade for later. I think that's pretty good evidence that they made it for now. Those guys weren't going to be able to help him for a month.
Yeah, and they also, they took one hole and they moved the hole to a different place. But
That's right.
I think they were much more worried about Pierce and Ray Allen than whether they could patch together the centers.
I agree with that. And I didn't understand the Semi or Dan thing for a while until I saw I forget who said it, that he was out of condition and wouldn't be ready to play for several weeks on his new team. They were saying that. And that was just clear to me that, the deal is, if you're not playing regularly on the Celtics or really any other NBA franchise, you got to come in extra. You got to come in like 2 extra times a day and get your workout in because you're not going to get minutes during the games. And Semi wasn't doing that.
Well, and then a little financial element to that too.
Yeah, a little bit, but I think it was more.
$2
I think they could have figured out another way, but they just decided, you know what? We can make this work. We can get this deal done this way. And this kid, we've given him so many chances to prove to us that he's serious about this and he wants to do this, and he just isn't getting it.
Mm. Well, Jeff Green obviously is going to be the guy who determines whether this is a good trade. And
yeah, although Christus has been kind of fun so far, hasn't he?
Yeah, he is. There are those moments, though, like there's been a couple times, like Chris came in on the low post and just doing whatever he wants. You're like, that's why he's not a good defensive player.
Exactly.
But Jeff Green, I don't know. My dad and I have been talking about it because I had talked my dad off the ledge with the whole thing because he loved Perkins. He doesn't think Jeff Green has a position. He's texting me during the games.
Oh, really?
Jeff Green sucks.
Well, he's not alone. There's a lot of people in Boston that feel the same way. But I would remind everybody that people, remember this? They thought that the KG for Al Jefferson trade was a bad idea.
Right.
I mean, come on. Really?
Well, those people were dumb.
Yes.
But I think people use another analogy I saw was like Nomar in 2004, but I think people don't remember that correctly. Nomar had really burned his welcome out at that point.
Yeah, he was a pain in the neck to
This
deal
was
with.
different. This was a guy who I think people just really felt attached to because he was an 18-year-old kid.
Yeah.
We watched him grow up. We watched him get in shape.
He grew up with us. He was part of our family. Absolutely.
Yeah, and he was a nice kid, and
the sweetest guy going. That growl was all a facade. He was one of the sweetest athletes I've ever been around.
Yeah, my buddy Sully, who works for the team, said he was in his top 3.
Oh, easily. Just the sweetest guy going. Loved him to death. And, but, couldn't catch the ball. Like Rondo, I thought it was interesting. Rondo's like, they traded away my best friend, and he's brooding around, and he's moping and doping. And I'm thinking, give me a break, man. You hated playing with him. You go down there, you give him the no-look, you drop it out of bounds. Who are you kidding?
And then you'd stare him down for a second.
Yeah, exactly. Please.
Yeah. We'll see, but it's going to come down to whether Jeff Green plays well or not. Because if he doesn't, then this team has no bench, and they're also relying on Shaq and Jermaine O'Neal. That if you're going to play the odds, 60% Shaq's healthy for the playoffs, and probably 30% for Jermaine. So it's a little dicey. But I don't really like anybody else's team that much either.
Yeah, and even the Spurs, with as great as they've done, and I mean, I've always said that I think Pop's the best coach ever. I really do. Talk about a no-nonsense guy. I love the guy. They got some young guys that they're counting on. That it's easy to be Gary Neal right now, but what about June? Can he still do it? I don't know.
They found out they had
George
that happen Roger Mason a couple years ago.
Right.
Remember? They're all
Yeah.
Roger Macy's a revelation. Then playoffs came around, and he was exit stage right.
Well, and you know what? George Hill got exposed a little bit just for the 5 seconds that Tony Parker was out, too.
I like that Dallas team. I
Well,
think they have a lot of different looks they can throw, and in a series, they can do this, they can do that. They have Dirk at the end of the games. Like, they're pretty interesting.
But come on, Bill, can they close?
Well, Dirk can close. I don't know if they
I
can
know
close
Dirk
on
can,
the other end.
But can everybody else? And you know what? There's this undercurrent, and you saw a little bit of it after, Carlisle said, "Oh, they're soft," and then they came back and they proved they weren't soft, and then they took little veiled shots at Rick. I mean, Rick is one of the best X and O's coach ever. I mean, he really is. He's so talented and so good, but guys just don't like him.
He's almost like a little too smart.
He's way too smart. I felt that way when I covered him. I'd walk away going, "All right, never mind." Plus he can play Mozart.
Were you there for? You were covering them for '86, right?
Oh yeah. Well, as I was the 14th man in, I wasn't the beat writer.
You're still going to some of those.
Oh yeah. Are you kidding? It's the biggest thrill of my life. I go to bed at night going, I can't believe they're paying me to do this. Are you kidding?
I want ESPN to just rerun those as a series. Just rerun those games. Here's how it should be played, right here.
Unbelievable. One loss at home. And you know what was funny? I was asking, I don't know why I was, but I was asking Mikhail Anbird recently about the one loss at home to Portland.
Steve Coulter.
Said, what's that? Yeah,
Steve Coulter. He caught fire.
Exactly. And Bird said, you know what? They just flat out beat us.
Yeah.
There was no mystery to it. We didn't let down. We didn't lie down. They just flat out beat us.
That Celtics team, their one weakness, and they didn't really have a weakness, but if they're, they were susceptible to those super athletic teams.
Yeah, well,
those teams that can run the floor.
What's changed in 20-some odd years? Nothing.
So you're thinking, sounds like you're leaning toward Miami and the Lakers.
I just don't think so because I still think this. I don't know. Maybe I'm around the Celtics too much. The other night, all right, they're losing to Milwaukee. Now, I have a 14-year-old son. He's just a train wreck, okay, because he lives and breathes the Celtics. And he said, I hate Rondo, and he shut off the TV. I'm going to bed, which he should have gone to bed anyway because it was a 9 p.m. game and it was past his bedtime. And I said, Doug, they're going to win this game.
Yeah.
He said, there's no way they're going to win this game. And he went stomping up to bed. I knew they were going to win. And when you get that feeling with a team, when you're around them every day, that's the team that you feel like can do it. And that's the feeling I get with this team. They mess around a little bit. That Clippers game, I don't really know what went on there. Other than
no
I think
bench.
Being shorthanded, I think caught up with them a little bit. Not having Big Baby, people undervalue Big Baby and what he helps, helps them do. And but I think that's not enough has been said about Big Baby the last few days, him being out. And so they have games like that, but man, they close out games. And so I'm picking them out of the East until I see a team that closes out games in the East better than they do, and I just haven't seen anybody.
Well, I worry because I went to that Golden State game, Perk's last game.
Yep.
And I left that game thinking that team's going to win the title. That team has an identity. There was a certain toughness in place.
Right.
I really think that the fact that they hadn't lost with a totally healthy team, I think that mattered to those guys. Mm-hmm. And now they've shaken that whole thing up. I don't think they're as tough. And even something as subtle as in that Utah game, Al Jefferson just right in KG's face, barking at him. Mm-hmm. I just don't think that happens if Perkins is on the court.
I think you're overvaluing Perkins.
All right.
Yeah, and you know what? I hate to say that because I am the, I love the kid, but a lot of his toughness was empty toughness, and when you look at all the polls.
But same for KG though. I mean, I would say he's empty tough too.
Of course, but when you look at the player polls, and they always say who's the most overrated guy in the league, who won every year? Perk. Every year. So if all that barking is supposed to be toughness, and guys are saying, yeah, we don't buy it, then. Yeah,
but collectively, I felt like. I worry about KG now because so much of his game is that false bravado.
Yeah, it is.
He's got nobody backing him up. But here's my thing. I think the Lakers are going to get there, and everybody's forgetting that it's a 10-week season for them. Mm-hmm. I think it comes down to who gets home court in Chicago, Boston.
I would agree with that because Chicago is young enough that they need home court. Yeah. They really need it.
They're not going to win a Game 7 in Boston. They could, but I don't see it.
And you know what? I got to tell you, the Lakers, there's something, what I just said about the Celtics, they're going to win that game. The Lakers, the fact that they lost this game last night, that would be disturbing to me if I were a Lakers fan.
Gasol looked a little detached.
It's 5 rebounds.
Detached? Yeah.
5 rebounds. I mean, if you said to me the Miami Heat's going to beat the Lakers, I'd say, all all right, well, I guess that's possible. But if you told me they're going to do it by winning the offensive boards 18-13, by outscoring them in the paint 46-30, I would have told you were out of your gourd. And that's what happened last night. And that's just, to me, the Lakers, it is as simple as Bynum and Gasol. Bynum being willing to understand that he's not going to get more shots. He's going to be their perk, if you will. He's going to be a defensive, intimidating presence, and he has changed their once he kind of has embraced that in the last few weeks, they've been playing so great. But Gasol's got to be a 20-10 guy every night. And
their bench died, which Steve Blake.
Yeah, I don't know.
Off the reservation. I mean, he's shooting like 20% this month or something. Yeah. And so now they have 6 guys, and from what I've seen, you can kind of it reminds me a little bit of the Celtics last year, where you can kind of sneak back into the game against them at the beginning of the second and the fourth quarter. You can sneak.
The one thing that I keep waiting is for Derek Fisher to be a liability, because your logic tells you he should be, and it just doesn't happen. The guy's so smart, hits big shots. You expect somebody to expose him, and it never really happens.
I would say Celtics-Lakers would be my gunpoint pick, just because it seems like the Celtics have a better chance at home court.
I'm still buying the Spurs over the Lakers.
Man, Kobe just doesn't lose to them, though.
Well, this might be the year, because as we just detailed, Kobe ain't quite Kobe anymore.
All right, Jackie McMullan, so we'll see you on ESPN.com, Boston, as well as Around the Horn. You like doing Around the Horn.
It's silly and fun and irreverent, but you know what it does for me? I walk into a locker room, and Blake Griffin, I don't have to introduce myself. And at this age, and I'm watching my kids, I don't want to be traveling all over the country introducing myself. So I'll take it.
I was shocked when I did those PTIs, the amount of people that watch that show.
Yeah, PTI is a great show. That's a wonderful show. But see, you have to fly to Washington, D.C. to do that.
I know.
See, I'm all about, I need to be I'm in the 978 area code now, but I need to stay in New England to get everything done with my kids and my husband and my family and keep everything good. So the occasional trip is great, but I don't travel much more than I have to.
Jackie McMullan, it was a pleasure. I'm glad we finally were able to do this.
This is long overdue. And
come back. Yeah,
and I can now admit, now that we're not head to head, that I loved your book. So.
Oh, thank you, and I loved yours as well.
All right, good.
So there
now
we go.
Admit that.
Right.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah. Talk to you
Have a great
soon.
one.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right, that was fun. Glad we finally got her on. One last thing. I started a Facebook page on Monday. You can check out facebook.com/Bill Simmons. And a little compliment to the old Twitter, posting mostly videos and pictures, stuff like that. Check it out. Anyway, Joe Mead. Joe Mead?
Yes.
I think that was the best week in BS Report history.
I think so. And on the heels of Klosterman and Connolly the week before.
What a run.
Unbelievable.
What a run. Who's going to mess it up? What crappy guest is going to end the streak? I have to keep this going now. It's like a hit streak in baseball.
I know.
I've had like 10 straight hits, something like that. So we'll see you next week in the BS Report. Have a good weekend.
So I get to sign off. Whoa.
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.